For millions of Americans, it began as an ordinary winter morning. January 28, 1986. The sky above Florida was clear. The countdown was proceeding normally. Television cameras were rolling. School classrooms across the country were watching. And in just over 1 minute, an event that was supposed to inspire a generation would instead become one of the most shocking tragedies in American history. Because on that morning, the Space Shuttle Challenger did not simply fail. It exploded in front of an entire nation. And for 73 seconds, nobody watching had any idea that they were witnessing a disaster in the making. The Space Shuttle program represented the future. For years, NASA had transformed astronauts into American heroes. The shuttle was designed to be reusable, reliable, and routine. Spaceflight was no longer supposed to be an extraordinary event. It was becoming something closer to regular transportation. That confidence helped make Challenger one of the most anticipated launches in NASA history. On board were 7 crew members, veteran astronauts, highly trained specialists, and one passenger who made this mission different from every mission before it, a New Hampshire schoolteacher named Krista McAuliffe. She had been selected from thousands of applicants to become the first teacher in space. Her journey captured the imagination of the country. Children saw themselves in her. Teachers saw one of their own. NASA saw an opportunity to reconnect America with the excitement of exploration. As launch day approached, anticipation grew. News stations covered the mission extensively. Schools organized special viewings. Millions prepared to watch history unfold. But behind the scenes, concerns were growing. The night before launch was unusually cold. Temperatures around the launch site dropped far below what engineers normally expected. Ice formed on equipment. Workers worried about how some shuttle components might react. Most concerning were the solid rocket boosters attached to the shuttle. Inside those boosters were rubber seals known as O-rings. Their job seemed simple: prevent extremely hot gases from escaping during launch. If those seals failed, the consequences could be catastrophic. Some engineers expressed serious concerns. They warned that the cold weather could make the rubber less flexible, less capable of sealing properly, more vulnerable to failure. The warnings sparked heated discussions. Meetings stretched late into the night. Arguments were made. Data was reviewed. Decisions were debated. Yet despite the concerns, the launch remained scheduled. By sunrise, Challenger was still cleared for flight, and the countdown continued. Across America, nobody knew that one of the most important decisions in NASA history had already been made. At Cape Canaveral, the crew boarded the shuttle. They settled into their seats. They followed procedures they had practiced countless times. Outside, cameras focused on the launch pad. Thousands of spectators waited. The atmosphere felt optimistic, exciting, hopeful. At 11:38 a.m. Eastern Time, the engines ignited. Flames erupted beneath the vehicle. The massive spacecraft began to rise. Cheers filled the air. The mission was underway. At first, everything appeared normal. The shuttle climbed into the blue sky. Controllers monitored systems. Viewers watched in awe. The vehicle accelerated higher and higher. What nobody could see was that trouble had already begun. Just moments after liftoff, one of the O-rings on the right solid rocket booster failed to seal properly. A tiny plume of hot gas escaped. For a brief period, debris temporarily blocked the opening. The leak seemed contained. The shuttle continued climbing. From the outside, everything looked fine, but the danger remained. As Challenger accelerated, powerful forces pushed against the vehicle. The temporary seal weakened. The leak reopened. This time, the escaping flame became stronger, much stronger, invisible to most viewers, unnoticed by the millions watching television. Second after second, the shuttle continued toward space. The crew followed procedures. Mission Control monitored data. The launch commentary remained calm. Everything seemed routine. Then came 73 seconds. At an altitude of roughly 46,000 feet and traveling faster than sound, The escaping flame burned into a critical support structure. It damaged the external fuel tank. The tank contained hundreds of thousands of gallons of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, the fuel feeding the shuttle's journey into orbit. Within moments, structural failure began, and then everything changed. A massive fireball erupted across the sky. White clouds exploded outward. Two rocket boosters shot away in separate directions. The familiar shape of Challenger vanished. Millions of Americans stared at their televisions. Many didn't immediately understand what they were seeing. Neither did some commentators. The images were confusing. The explosion looked surreal, almost impossible. Surely the shuttle couldn't simply disappear, but it had. In mission control, faces turned serious. Conversations became urgent. Data streams vanished. Controllers searched for answers. For several agonizing moments, uncertainty filled the room. Then reality began to sink in. Something catastrophic had happened. Outside, spectators stood frozen. Some pointed toward the sky. Others remained silent. Parents looked at their children. Teachers looked at their students. The celebration had transformed into shock. The strange cloud pattern hanging above the Atlantic Ocean became one of the most haunting images in American history. Back in classrooms around the country, children watched in confusion. Many had gathered specifically to see Krista McAuliffe reach space. Instead, they witnessed a tragedy unfold live on television. For an entire generation, the moment became unforgettable. The questions came quickly. What happened? Could anyone have survived? Was there any chance the crew escaped? Investigators rushed to understand the disaster. Recovery operations began. Evidence was collected from the ocean. Engineers examined debris. Experts reconstructed the final seconds of flight. The process would take months. As the nation waited, grief spread. The 7 crew members were no longer just astronauts. They had become symbols of courage and sacrifice. Their names appeared on newspaper front pages. Their photographs filled television screens. Memorial services were held across the country. Americans mourned together. Just days later, President Ronald Reagan addressed the nation. His words captured the heartbreak millions felt. He spoke directly to schoolchildren. He honored the crew, and he reminded Americans that exploration has always carried risk. The speech became one of the defining moments of his presidency. Meanwhile, investigators continued searching for answers. Eventually, the evidence pointed to a clear cause. The cold temperatures had compromised the O-ring seal in the right solid rocket booster. The failure allowed hot gases to escape. That leak triggered the chain of events that destroyed Challenger. But the investigation uncovered something even more troubling. Technical failure alone was not the whole story. Warnings had existed. Concerns had been raised. Engineers had questioned the risks. Yet organizational pressures, communication breakdowns, and flawed decision-making contributed to the final outcome. The disaster was not simply a mechanical failure. It was also a human one. The findings shook NASA. The agency's reputation suffered. The shuttle fleet was grounded. Procedures were reevaluated. Safety systems were redesigned. Decision-making processes underwent major changes. The lessons were painful, but they became essential. Years later, space shuttle launches would resume. NASA would continue exploring. Astronauts would continue flying. And America would continue reaching toward the stars. Yet Challenger never faded from memory. Because the disaster represented more than a failed mission. It exposed the consequences of ignored warnings. It revealed the danger of treating extraordinary risks as routine. And it reminded the world that progress often comes with difficult lessons. Today, decades later, people still remember exactly where they were when Challenger exploded. They remember the bright Florida sky. They remember the shock. They remember the silence that followed. 73 seconds. Just 73 seconds separated excitement from tragedy. A routine launch became a national trauma. A symbol of optimism became a symbol of loss. And 7 people who dreamed of reaching space became part of history forever. The smoke trails vanished long ago. The television broadcasts ended decades ago. But the lesson remains. Because history's most devastating disasters rarely begin with a single explosion. They begin with small warnings, small doubts, small decisions, the kind that seem insignificant until the moment everything changes. And on that cold January morning in 1986, 73 seconds were all it took for America to learn that lesson in the most heartbreaking way imaginable.